Hi, we now continue along with the rest of the deductive argument types. We get now to what the rest of these all have the word syllogism on them. And so before we move along, syllogism, I suppose you can still have ones that fall into this category that are not necessarily syllogisms, but syllogism is actually a very specific term that refers to in logic as two premises used to support one conclusion. And usually they are logical forms like modus ponens, modus tollens. There are certain categorical types, hypothetical types, which are the ones I just mentioned, the names, disjunctive, and then logic of relations is listed in there. And so all of those, though, are specifically, a syllogism is two premises used to support one conclusion. And so, one of the things to keep in mind is that, it is two premises used to support one conclusion. Two premises, one conclusion. And so usually those premises work together. And so the idea here is that that is a specific type. And so, that's one thing to keep in mind if you see two premises, one conclusion. You could call it a syllogism, and you might want to look to see if it falls into one of those categories. So the first type is categorical. Now, categorical comes from the word category, and so categorical essentially is anything that uses words like all, or some, or no, and they're basically where they create these categories. We'll use Venn diagrams sort of to take apart categorical arguments, and so essentially, it's where all dogs are canines, some dogs have fur, therefore some canines have fur. Something like that, where we can actually do it with a Venn diagram where we draw circles and we can actually create a Venn diagram and show that that's true. But anytime you're using these categorical statements, usually we can evaluate rather easily whether or not they are valid or invalid. Hypothetical syllogism, basically, if you think about like a hypothetical situation, somebody says, what's a hypothetical situation? Well, they'll say, well, what would happen if the lights went out? Or what would happen if you lost power on the final day before this module was due? What would you do? That would be a hypothetical situation. Essentially what they're asking is, they're saying, what would you do if something happened? You're basically putting in a conditional. Hypotheticals are conditional statements. And so anything that has a conditional statement, an if-then statement, is a hypothetical statement. So hypothetical syllogisms are essentially statements that use if-then. And you can have different forms. You can have what we call a pure hypothetical syllogism, where you say, if I go to the party, then Bill will go. If Bill goes, then Sue will go. So if I go, then Sue will go. Okay, you're simply putting those together. The other types would be like modus ponens. If you get caught, then you're going to go to jail. You got caught, therefore you're going to jail. Or if you get caught, then you'll go to jail. You didn't go to jail, therefore you didn't get caught. That would be a modus tollens. And so anytime you use those if-then statements, we usually are thinking, we at least can look to see, are those trying to work together in a way that is reaching a conclusion necessarily? Now, disjunctive syllogism is essentially the idea that we have this word disjunct, and so disjunct. And so, basically a disjunct is an or statement. Anything that says, this or that is disjunctive. And so anytime you have a statement where you say this or that, it's not this, therefore it is that. So anytime you sort of use that or statement, and then you dismiss one of the ors, we can then prove the other or is true. Because if the first statement was true, this is going to happen or that's going to happen, and this didn't happen, then we know that has to have happened if the statement this or that happened is true. Hope that made sense. And then finally, logic of relations. Logic of relations basically depend upon things being related, whether it could be relationally, like as in, your sister, brother, etc. And some of those the relationships don't actually hold in a necessary fashion. Like my cousin's cousin is not my cousin always, right? I mean, for example, I have one of my cousins. I mean, her mother is my aunt. She's been my aunt since I was a little kid. But she has nieces and nephews that I am not related to. And so My cousin, though, is their cousin, and so I'm not their cousin. But anytime you have things like mother, father, sister, brother, a lot of times those things will hold out more. And so if the relationship can be proven through that, or relationally in the space, in the idea of spatially. And finally, I will throw in one that's not on the list, but sometimes you can just say that it's deductive for no other reason than because it follows necessarily. Okay, that, it may not fall into one of these categories, but don't let that discourage you from thinking that it could be a necessary statement. All right, thank you.